Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for tuning in. Today I'm joined by the author of the fantastic Every Line of You, Naomi Gibson. So thank you for joining us today, Naomi.
Thank you very much for having me.
I've just finished this book, and if anybody hasn't read it yet, it's absolutely fantastic. It comes out in, is it just under 2 weeks now? So at the beginning of August. And it's a really great read with lots of sci-fi elements. So can you tell us a little bit about it, Naomi, to start us off?
Sure. So here it is. Well, it's Red Spirit Edge Glory. So it's a book about, it's a thriller, and it's about a very lonely girl called Lydia who creates her own artificial intelligence to love her. And it centers around this relationship between a girl who is so lonely she has nothing to lose, and an AI who is capable of doing almost anything and is quite happy to help her get revenge on the people who've been mean to her.
I really loved it, and I think that you can tell just from that blurb that it's got so many different elements. It's got the romance, it's got that kind of contemporary feel about bullying and, you know, how teens get on with each other, and then it's got this huge sci-fi element. Was that something that you intended to do when you started writing it?
No, it's funny really, because when I had finished writing it, I was like, what have I actually written? And it is kind of cross genre, kind of cross genre bending thing, isn't it? And I was aware that I had written something that was a bit unique, and when I was querying it and I was in the query trenches, I was like, oh, I've written this sci-fi book because, you know, it involves artificial intelligence, but it's not a sci-fi. And then it wasn't until my marketing department got hold of it and they announced my book and they said, we've got this psychological thriller with romantic elements. I was like, that's what it is, that's what I've written. So no, I didn't realize what it was at the time, and I didn't really set out to write a specific genre. It was just the characters that came to me first. But we can talk more about that later.
Excellent, yeah, we will. So my next question kind of leads on from that. So obviously you've got the romance element. I think that was actually what I enjoyed reading the most, by the way, the romantic scenes, and how you manage that with AI. But what was it that you enjoyed writing the most, from the kind of thrilling, darker scenes to the light, fluffy, romantic ones? What was it that you had the most fun with?
So as a reader, I love when two characters get together. So Mina and Jared, for example, I was like, yes, when that happened. And then so as a writer, I love writing that kind of thing. So yeah, for me it was definitely the romance element to the book, and I think because I actually pantsed the book, I didn't really set out to write what it was, and it reached a certain point and I was like, oh yeah, I see where this is going. And when it finally did hit that point, I was like, yes, this is the best thing ever. It was just totally up my own arse as I was writing it. It was great. But yeah, so definitely the romantic stuff for me was my favorite part to write, and that culmination of their relationship, that was really good fun.
Brilliant. And I wonder if that's why I loved it so much as a reader, that you can kind of feel your joy and love of that genre. And obviously I think, have you mentioned that you enjoy stuff like Twilight? You've kind of read the full range of YA. Do you think that is that helpful to you, being a big YA reader who's read like that huge range of stuff?
I probably I do. If any book has got because I don't read pure romance, but I love a strong romantic subplot, something like that mixed in between, because romance is always a good subplot, isn't it? You know, no one's ever going to be disappointed with a romantic subplot.
I think so anyway. I totally agree.
Yeah. So I think Twilight came out when I was like 16, and yeah, if you look at how that one person singled out that awkward, clumsy, not very pretty girl, and fell in love with her, I think you can probably see that in my book as well. Like, just because as a teenager, you know, you wasn't very pretty, felt quite clumsy, a bit awkward, you know, you're always, and you read this book about that one guy who falls in love with you, you're like, yes. So I think I always try and bring that to my own writing for any teen readers who might feel similarly.
I think I agree, and I know that some authors say that they don't read around their genre because they don't want to like accidentally finish stuff, but I just find it really useful, and I feel like it's what I enjoy writing and what I enjoy reading, so I don't know why I'd punish myself and not do one or the other.
I agree, yeah. I definitely think you've got to read around, because if you want to conquer your genre, you have to read in it. Do you know what I mean? Because what also though, if you're trying to write something, it might already exist, and then
I've been there. You think you've had a great idea, and then you just do a cursive Google, and you're like, oh, that's a Buffy episode. Never mind, carry on.
Already beat me to it.
Yeah, it usually is Buffy for me, to be honest. I think I've written some great dialogue, and then I'm like, no, Buffy said that. Never mind. But I think that what was really impressive to me about your book as well is the fact that you incorporated sort of scientific elements that I know are really grounded in fact. And how did you go about doing that? Because I'm sure it all felt really, really realistic to me, and quite terrifying actually, how AI can kind of, so you've achieved your goal of making me terrified of my phone, so thanks for that. But how did you do it?
So my husband is a huge YouTube watcher. He doesn't post any of his own videos, but he's massively into this particular area of YouTube called TechTube. And yeah, I know. And it's like this sub pocket of people who talk about, you know, space, technology generally, AI, you know, quantum computing, things like that. And he's always been into it. And it's just always on in the background, and I guess I just kind of end up listening too. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't know, these things just filter through, don't they, as you're wandering through the house or whatever. But yeah, so he's always been really into AI and quantum computing and things like that generally. But also we're both quite big fans of Elon Musk, and I know he's a bit, you know, so not everyone loves him, and he's a billionaire trying to get to space at the moment. It isn't a great topic, is it? But he has got some really interesting thoughts on AI, and I listened to quite a few of his lectures, just because Ollie had them on, my husband, he had them on, so from that kind of angle I already was aware of quite a lot of AI issues, but from the other aspects like hacking and things like that, I didn't really know how to hack, and I didn't really my husband, again, he's quite into computers, and he's built our computer for us, and he likes to listen to people witter on about graphics cards and things like that. So I basically just asked him, look, right, because in the very early description of Henry's computer, you know, I talk about like his big monitors, his water cooling to cool his processor down, things like that. So I was like asking my husband, how would you go about doing this, you know, and asking him how it might look. But in terms of hacking, I had to research that.
Oh God, that's a terrible thing to Google, isn't it? How to be a hacker.
Yeah. I made sure I did not do it on my work laptop, by the way. I just want to put that out there. That was definitely done on my personal one. So yeah, so I was looking at basically how to hack and just do simple hacking things, which I haven't put into practice, but I think I got the general gist. But also that I was quite careful not to be too technical in the book, because it can be quite daunting for a reader. So whenever I do mention it, I try and be descriptive rather than technical, or I tried to just be technical for a very short amount of time so it's easily digestible, basically. But also though, I thought on the range of hacking to building an AI, learning to hack is a lot easier. I can't learn how to build an AI, but I can learn how to hack. So when I tried to demonstrate that Lydia could hack, that kind of gives you believability that she might also then be able to build an AI. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, am I making any sense? Am I just rambling?
You are. No, you're not rambling at all. I'm just nodding intently, because everything you're saying you try to achieve, you definitely did, because I'm a complete tech novice, as in I know nothing about hacking or building a computer or any of it, but I felt like I could access it, and I believed that Lydia could do it. I completely believed that she could do it. And I believe that you, and I believe that you know what you're talking about too. So obviously,
great. Well, there we go.
How much of the tech stuff did you make up then? Because obviously, you know, teenage girls aren't generally making boyfriends in the bedroom, so I'm assuming that isn't real. I hope it's not real.
Yeah.
But yeah, so was there a definite point where like science ended and your imagination began?
Yeah, for sure. I think when Lydia puts Henry's chip in her arm, I was like, I'm totally taking creative license here, but I mean, this is where the story needs to go. But also as an AI, their progress and development of self-development would be really, really quick. Yeah. So I needed to, so I think that kind of drives the plot along as well quite nicely, because Henry is like quite focused on developing himself. So he starts off in a computer. This is a bit spoilery.
Maybe you can gloss over exactly how he develops, but it's suffice to
we'll
say that he develops very quickly, full stop.
So he develops very quickly, shall we say, from how he goes from A to B. But that is because an AI they would definitely be figuring out how to get to the next step. But yes, that is where my creative license definitely took over, because I don't think what I've had happen in the book has actually happened in real life, but I'll probably eat my hat there. It probably has. It's probably an AI walking around.
Maybe. I mean, you know, anything in terms of science, like we don't know the bounds, do we?
Lab somewhere.
And I'm sure it's top secret if it's out there. We don't know about it for a reason. I think that is one of the things that felt really unique. I don't think I've ever read a book that so seamlessly kind of blends that sci-fi and romance. So it was really cool. So thank you for writing something like that. I'm just going to check. I've totally lost the track of where I'm up to my question. That was it. Actually, we're going to go on to talking a little bit more about your characters. So without giving too much about the plot away, Lydia and Henry develop a relationship, and both of them will go as far as it takes for the other person, or AI in Henry's case. I was interested as a writer, how did you sort of tread that moral line with the plot, and was it something you were thinking about? Because as a reader, the main thing that really, I mean, there was loads that drove me through it, but I was really interested in how far Lydia would go, and would she go past a point that I felt comfortable with as a reader? Was that something that you were mindful of, or did that just come through naturally as you were writing?
Yeah. Do you ever look back at something you've written and are like, how did I do that? That is totally me right now. In some of the very first drafts, Lydia went quite a lot further than she does in the final version. And after some beta readers and after my agent gave me feedback, they were like, you know, maybe she should be sort of towing the line a little bit more here. So but in terms of her plot and her character development, I felt she had to go quite far in order for her to come to the realization she does later. So I'm doing lots of this. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's keeping my attention with your gestures as well.
Because she does go quite far, but she then sort of realizes we have gone quite far, we need to toe the line here, and she draws Henry back. And then it becomes quite a focus later of actually how far do we go and how far is okay. But I think that is actually something teenagers probably learn themselves at that age. Sorry to be really patronizing, but I think
you're not. You can talk about your own experiences, you know, you're not talk about anybody else's. I totally agree that until probably my early 20s, I think I did a lot of that, like that kind of back and forth of working out what I was comfortable with, and you know, new things come up, don't they? Like say with COVID, we've suddenly got this new situation where we've got to redefine what we're comfortable with, what our families and friends are comfortable with. So I think it kind of happens all the way through our lives, really. I don't think it's just teens. So true. And I think maybe that's why I love teen books so much, that we're kind of, none of us are complete human, are we, in terms of like we've all got growth and development, and we can, I certainly remember my teen years kind of fondly mostly, but really strongly. So, and I like that feeling and that intensity of Lydia's feelings for Henry. Just I wondered when I read the blurb, how are you going to pull this off? And it was really, really cool how you did. So thank you. We'll just have another little love in for your book. And okay, so I'm interested as well, so I can steal your ideas. How much you've said that you kind of pantsed your plot a little bit. Like, does that tend to be your general approach to writing? What do you start from? You start from the characters in this case. Like, where do you go from that initial idea to completion?
I'm just looking at my notes now. I made some notes.
Yeah, go for it.
So this is the only book I have ever truly pantsed where I sat down and I did not know where it was going. So I didn't have an ending in mind. So I do tend to naturally pants books, but I know where they will end and I work towards the ending. But this one, I didn't know where it was going to end. And this was the only book where I've ever really, I mean, I wrote my very first draft in a hot and messy 2 weeks, if I'm honest. Yeah, because it just absolutely possessed me. But the refining came much later, and I ended up redrafting about 7 or 8 times, as you do. But yeah, so this is the only book I've ever really pantsed, but I did do a lot of character development for Lydia, and I worked out, you know, I went into the book already knowing a lot about her home life, so I already knew that she had like a death in the family that was like hanging over them. I already knew she had a bad relationship with her mum, and I already knew her dad was missing, and I already knew that she was getting bullied at school. And I think for me, if I can work out the way a character ticks and what makes them tick, and what their home life is like, so long as I know all of that and I know what they want, I can do the rest myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So a lot of work comes before the book, but you work on the character and then that drives the plot.
Yeah, I think so. How do you do it?
I don't know. I think I answer this question differently whenever anybody asks me, but with this book, it was certainly New Orleans. So I went to the city in 2012, and I just knew I wanted to write something about and I decided pretty quickly that it was going to be a girl who went there, because I can't really write as if I live there, and it's my experiences. So I wanted to write about, and I wrote about a girl from Yorkshire like me, who goes to the city. So then I think once I've got that central premise, I think the characters do drive a lot of the plot, and certainly it was the sister dynamic and the dynamic with the girl's mother, who also missing. What is it about these YA parents who are missing and terrible? But yeah, so I think that became like the emotional core of the book, and very quickly, and that informed how like the decisions the characters made, and the fact that Libby is very closed and Mina's very open created quite a lot of conflict between them.
That was a really good. I quite enjoyed that as part of the thing, because it's like everybody deals with something differently, don't they? But they obviously just need to talk to each other and just come together. And I was like, oh, you guys, you both want the same thing. You're just dealing with it differently.
Yeah, and I think to some extent I am quite a lot like Mina, and I think that doesn't happen. I'm writing a short story at the moment where the main character is, I hope she's not like me, because she's awful, like she's really awful, and she does have some slight redeeming qualities that come out through it, but I think with Mina I just really put a lot of myself into her, and I think she's probably a bit more kind of reckless and runs into situations more than I do, because otherwise there'd be no book. You know, Amy would sit home and drink hot chocolate and not, you know, go into the house that might be, you know, overrun with vampires or whatever, or she wouldn't, you know, Amy wouldn't actively seek out a serial killer, whereas Mina would. So yeah, I think characters for me is definitely, characters and setting is where it's at, and then everything just spiraled from there, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get the setting.
Yeah. Did you write down your character stuff then? Did you physically sit and like plot it out, or did you just work through it in your head when you wrote it?
Yeah, so at the time when I got this idea, I was going to a local college, and we were doing like a little writing class there, and I had just been to one, and we had to do like a character development class, and we all got given like little lucky dip bags of items, and we had to come up with a character based on those items. And in mine there was like box of fuses, a screwdriver, and things like that.
Really? Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And that was how I came up with this idea of a teen hacker. But then it was like after that, you know, when you do those character questionnaires, it's like, when's their birthday, do they have any brothers or sisters, what's their middle name, that kind of thing. I filled one of those out for her, and that was the very first time that I'd ever done it, like properly done it. And that was when all this stuff came out about her family life, and that she was actually really lonely, and then coupled together with that hacking thing, that was like boom, you know, that was my idea. So it's kind of weird how these things strike you, isn't it?
It's awesome. I mean, I've done that as an exercise with primary school children. So I've done things like a backpack got delivered to my class mysteriously one day, you know, that I packed myself, and it got items in it, and we pulled them out and we decided what kind of kid these items might belong to, and it turns out they belong to Alex Rider from Stormbreaker, and then we read Stormbreaker. But I think that having something to latch onto in terms of a character or a plot or a setting, I mean, I've got some cool stuff that I bought in New Orleans, like a voodoo doll, and I ended up writing. In fact, you can see her on the shelf behind me. Look, she's up there.
Yeah.
Menacingly, like glowering over us. But I think that I latch onto imagery and objects and stuff quite a lot. Like the short story I'm writing, like you can see all the kind of skulls and bats and stuff behind me. Like that ended up becoming like a kind of a symbol all the way through the story. And do you find anything like that inspiring, or do you think that,
yeah,
I suppose for your characters, certainly.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, actually. Just thinking about it, I don't think I've ever actually really thought about this properly before, but I did, so a book I'm writing at the moment is really quite sci-fi, and I remember when I first started writing it, I went on DeviantArt, and I was just like, you know, trying to find images of what I might be writing about, and then like saving them all, and like, yeah, like an image sort of hoarding dragon, trying to build up my setting of what it might look like. Yeah, so I think you're right, images are really strong and writing material, I think. Yeah.
Do you use Pinterest for that? Because I've just recently come to Pinterest and found it a bit of a revelation, really.
Sometimes I do. When I first joined Twitter, everyone was like all about these book aesthetics. Have you seen those around?
Yeah.
So I went on Pinterest, and after I'd written Henry, I tried to find loads of images that might help out with that. I think I put them together in a little TikTok video.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Was really good. I sent it straight to my husband, actually, like, how can we do this for
my
book? Yeah.
Yeah, get on it, Mr. McCaw.
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of, I have to admit now, I had started it for Mina and the Undead, and then as part of my marketing, we said we'd share it, and I looked at the board and I was like, oh gosh, this is rubbish. It's gonna be really embarrassing when I share it. So I added some stuff to it kind of after the fact. But then I did it. So I'm writing several other things. And I did it for these new projects, and actually I found it super helpful. Like in one of them, it's Halloween, and I ended up like searching for Halloween decorations and having a really, really fun time, and looking at like the way people carve pumpkins and stuff. And it's amazing how many plot ideas, like you see one pumpkin, you're like, oh, where would that pumpkin be placed? Who carved that pumpkin? And straight away, like you could have a character. It's, I think, imagery for me, I didn't realize how visual I was until I kind of started doing that. And like you said, sometimes you don't know what kind of writer you are until somebody asks you the question.
You're like, oh, I do that too. Yeah. Yeah, so true.
Cool. Right, I'm just going to check what my next question is actually. So we've talked about your plotting. Oh yeah, okay. So another thing, I think that characters are a really big part of your book. Do you think that in thrillers in general, and I mean, I write genre fiction too, like, do you think that when you're talking like horror thrillers, do you think that characters should play like a big role in that kind of book?
Yes, I think so, because for me in thrillers, your character is probably going to have to make a decision at some point that's going to piss someone off. And you have to have built in believability as to why they will have made that decision. And I think a lot of that comes from development, character development, sorry. And for me, all of that was tied into how Lydia is just so painfully lonely, and you learn about it really early on in the book. So she's second fiddle to her brother who died, which you can't really compete with. And her mum basically, you know, is mentally absent. Her dad is physically absent, and she's bullied, and she's bullied at school. She's overlooked. She's really, really overlooked. And so for her to then go out and make these sort of really, really morally grey decisions, you have to have the reader's backing for that. So like, for example, her and Henry end up doing a lot of things that are a bit illegal in some respects.
Just a tiny bit, yeah.
But you have to make sure that your reader is okay with that, otherwise they're going to throw the book out the window, do you know what I mean? Or they're going to just, you know, totally not be buying it. But so yeah, character development for me was really, really important, in that I had to have the reader's sympathy, and I had to lay it on super thick with all these different elements right at the beginning, so that when Lydia did cross a line, you were like, okay, I can see why she did it. Do you know what I mean?
It's really good. And I think this book pushed my boundaries really well, because I think sometimes you have a completely unlikable narrator, and I know some people enjoy that, but I find that really hard, because I have to be able to find something redeemable that I can kind of root for, unless it is the kind of book where you're just watching them all get horribly murdered, in which case, you know, like say Good Girls Die First by Catherine Foxfield. Catherine is great at writing terrible characters in that book, and then you just kind of watch them get picked off one at a time. But I think that Lydia, it was really clever the way you created her background and her history, and then you as the reader just had to see, like, wait, what your comfort level is and what you believe, and at what point she loses you in terms of, well, I wouldn't do that, but it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the book. Like, you can kind of watch her make some terrible decisions, some good decisions, and kind of you, as long as it's believable for her as a person, which it was.
Yeah.
I think that's where it worked. It was really, really good.
Oh, thanks, Amy.
So if you ever want to like have a boost, just come and have a little interview with me.
Yeah.
I really love it.
I like talking to you. I think that's why I write YA though, you know. I was just thinking, like, if you have an adult book and they make bad decisions, I think as an adult you're expected to know better. But I think as a teen you get a lot of leeway, because you're like, oh well, they're still only 17, they're still only 18, it's okay, they don't really know yet. And I think you get a lot of wiggle room to do some bad things with that.
So now, as an adult, I sometimes think I don't know what on earth I'm doing, and like I'm still figuring stuff out. And that is the part of the allure of YA. I think I do love that process. So, can you tell us a little bit how you got into being a YA author? Then, what was your publication journey like?
Sure. So I had always written, I think, but I sort of forgot about it when I was in my 20s. I was really trying to go career, I think. But when I was about about 4 or 5 years ago, I realised that I was actually really unhappy, and that my career wasn't making me happy. And my husband sat me down and was like, what would make you happy? And I decided to go back to writing classes. And for about 2 years I went to this college every week with a friend, and just learned how to write properly. Do you know what I mean? Like how to show, not tell, character arcs, character development, different types of plotting, certain things like that. That was where I learned the craft, I think. But although it's one of those things you're always still learning, isn't it? And then that was where I got my idea for this book, and where I hurried it out in a quick and hot 2 weeks. And after that I realised that I had written something, so that was actually the second book I had ever written, and I had realised that actually I'd written something there that I hadn't seen on a shelf, and I hadn't come across like in a film or anything like that. I was pretty sure I'd written something fairly unique, even if it was a fresh twist on something else. So I thought, right, I want to try and do something with this. So I decided to send it to a beta reading service, and they really liked it, and they wanted to scout it, and the scout the agent that it went to turned it down. And at the time I was like, oh, it's fine, that's like one agent, what do they know? And I went into the query trenches off the back of quite a positive experience, because I got lovely feedback from that beta reader, and it had been put in front of an agent, and I realized that was my goal. I needed to get an agent. And I started cold querying agents, and I got a lot of rejections. And I think the whole process for me was quite humbling, because at the beginning I was like, oh, I've got one rejection, like me and JK are gonna laugh over cocktails on that one rejection, it's gonna be fine. And then you had like 30 later. I was like, whoa, I just want an agent. And Jo at Skylark was probably the only agent who ever really took time with me. She gave me proper feedback. She gave me basically an R&R, a revise and resubmit, and she rang me and basically said, I really like your book, but your ending is not great. And I was like, oh, how rude, my ending's brilliant. And as a writer, I had written this book in a really quick 2 weeks, and it had absolutely possessed me, and it was still, the storyline was still possessing me. I was still really believing in this book, and for someone to say your ending's not right was really difficult for me. So I was like, okay, I'll go away and think about it. And I decided, I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 months later, where I'd now got 50 rejections. And also somebody else had said to me, your ending's not, are you going to do anything there? And I was like, what is this about my ending? My ending's perfect. So I was like, right, okay. So I reassessed what I wanted. And at that point, I was really, I no longer believed that me and JK were going to be best buds. I was just like, I just want an agent, I just want to see this goal come to life. So I was like, right, well, what do I want? Do I want to write a book? Because I've done that, I've written 2. Or do I want to actually get on a shelf? And I decided I want to get on a shelf. So I ripped my ending apart, my beautiful ending, and I wrote the ending that the reader would probably be expecting, and I sent it to Jo, and I said, I've written this ending, here's the new synopsis. And she basically signed me on the synopsis because I had changed my ending, and then when she was reading it, she did say it still needed some work when she was reading it, and she said, I'll always remember what she said to me on the phone, because when she rang me back, she was like, I can see you've worked hard, how do you feel about working even harder? And
my agent said almost the same thing to me. She's like, this is really, basically she said something like, this is really good, but it can be a lot better. I was like, oh good. Thanks.
Thanks for being so optimistic.
Your agent sounds like mine. I bet they get on really well, I think.
They're just like really frank, but they tell you what you need to know, tell you what you need, don't they, really? But
yes,
they're still optimistic. But so yeah, she basically said, you know, I could tell you worked hard, but how do you feel about working even harder? And I was like, look, I just want to get on a shelf now, that's my goal. So she said, right, okay. So she signed me, and then she sent me the editorial letter that basically said, you need to cut out 20,000 words out of your manuscript. And I was like, no. So I just made that really emotional decision about my ending, and I'd done you know, what the reader would want to expect, because she was great. She didn't say, you know, your ending's rubbish. She just said, as a reader, I was expecting XYZ to happen. And I was like, oh, okay, because the ending I had written was definitely for me, whereas now she wanted me to write it for a reader, for the critics, probably, you know how you do, like, for the critics. So I then went in and edited it again, and I cut about 20,000 words out my manuscript. So the middle part of my book, where it's set in a psychiatric ward, that actually had like this whole subplot going on, and we just tore it all out because we thought it's just distracting from the main plot, and that cut it down to about 60,000 words. And then Jo said it was ready, and we went on sub, and submission was really, really hard. And I remember crying in the Loch Lomond car park because I was just so sad. But the next day, Jo rang me and said Chicken House had made an offer, and it was and the rest is history. So yeah,
no, it's honestly, it's really fascinating to hear, because I think people, I remember somebody asked me a question online recently and said that they just don't know what the submission process is like, because it's kind of shrouded in mystery. And I think some of that, like, is just that writers, you kind of don't want to spill it all out there sometimes, because you kind of want to hold a little bit back about, like you said, what can be a really painful process. But I think that being really frank about it is really useful for people who are at different stages of this. And for me, like, kind of being at the same stage as you, like being a debut author, is really reassuring, because to hear that such a brilliant book went through all of that hardship still, and you had to really, really go through those rejections to get there. I think you've got to be realistic about what this business is like, and it's still really, really hard, even though, you know, I may have another contract on the table, which I haven't talked about yet, and that's great, but you don't ever know where that next contract or the one after that is going to come from, and you're going to get tons of rejections and tons of, you know, countries who don't want to publish your book, say, or readers who might not like it. It is the other really hard one. Yeah, and it's a really hard job, but it is amazing, and crafting something and, like, you know, talking to you about it is another lovely part of being an author. I think that, you know, making friends with people who have written books that you love, and, you know, so there are real up and down sides. So thank you for sharing that and being so open about it. I think it's really helpful to hear. So in terms of YA books then, before we finish, are there any books that you would like to recommend to people who've heard, I mean, this obviously needs to be at the top of your purchase list for August, so make that happen. Yay! So yeah, definitely I'd recommend getting this book pre-ordered. I mean, just look, is it Forbidden Planet that you can get these beautiful etches from?
Yeah, Forbidden Planet.
Forbidden Planet.
It's still only $5.99, which is like the cheapest you can get anywhere.
That is great. I love Forbidden Planet, and they've been really supportive of my book, so definitely, you know, if you want to pre-order the book, that's a great place to get it from if you want these beautiful edges. So are there any other YA books while people are ordering yours? Is there anything else that they should be looking at?
So because I was talking earlier about strong romantic elements in books, one of my favourite YA books is 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray.
I haven't read that. I need to get it.
I loved it. So it's this perfect blend of sci-fi, historical romance. It is a genre-bending beauty, and it's basically about this girl called Marguerite, and her parents are scientists, and they've developed a device that she can hop reality, so go to different universes. And at the beginning of her book, it's literally on the first page, her father is dead and the murderer has escaped into a different reality, so she uses their device to chase after him. And she goes from, like, you know, modern day, I think it's modern day San Francisco. She goes to historical Russia, she goes to futuristic London, and she chases this killer throughout the book, and it is just so good. And it's got this gorgeous romantic subplot, and yeah, honestly, I don't you know, when you just read it, you just need to read it.
I do, honestly. I can't believe I haven't. It sounds brilliant.
It's really, really good. I really, really love that book, and it's a trilogy as well, if you wanted to. I mean, it's got really good what's the word, it finishes really nicely in book one, but if you wanted to read on, you can do so. Cool. Yeah, it's a really good one. And then another one I've got is The Loneliest Girl in the Universe.
Yes, that is such a good book.
It is so good, and I started reading it thinking, like, oh, it's going to be like this epistolary romance, and it's not. It's like this. It's such a good thriller. I was like, this is genius when I was reading it. It's so good. So I definitely recommend that one as well.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. And they fit really nice with your book, actually, if you kind of thirsting for that sci-fi element. Yes, great. Thank you for that. So can you tell us anything about what you're working on now, or what your next steps as an author will be, apart from what you've already said to us?
Yeah, sure. So my next book will also be a chicken house. Woohoo! And I can't say too much about it, but it is another kind of thriller with sci-fi elements. So this one involves virtual reality. And I'm terrible. I want to tell you all about it, but I probably can't.
Full stop. Come on, Naomi. It's good that you're practicing this with me. It's about virtual reality. Full stop.
I'm terrible. I'm with secrets. I'm just like, oh yeah, I can't really tell anyone, but I'll tell you.
Well, let's not tell YouTube. You can tell me when we stop recording, and then you can still get it out.
Sorry, YouTube.
Oh, thank you so much. I knew I'd enjoy talking to you. We've talked a little bit online, and I really enjoyed watching. Naomi's just recently ventured onto BookTok. So what are you called on BookTok?
I am Naomi G. Writes. There you go. I think I'm not on Twitter as well. So yeah.
If you want to follow Naomi, she takes lovely photographs, and your TikTok videos are so good. They just really made me smile. Like, you come across really well on camera. I still need to figure out how to do TikTok. I'm not like a kind of short person.
It's a hard platform.
It is, and I think rambling on YouTube is maybe more my thing. But I don't know, I might try TikTok at some point.
Well, yeah, your videos are excellent. You're really good. All the way you edit all your bookstore videos together as well. I'm just like, oh, she really knows what she's doing.
I don't know. The way my husband edits them together, not me, but yeah.
Okay. Well, Kev knows what he's doing.
He does. I think we're a really good team with that. I just do the talking and he does all the technical bit behind the scenes.
Good team, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really hope that people go out and buy this book, because it's fantastic. Out soon.
Thank you.
And so thank you to everybody who's continued to watch my channel. I've got other fantastic authors like Naomi lined up. I wanted to point you, but I don't know what side you'll be on when we actually record this. So Naomi, wherever she is, when this gets pulled off. So yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope people will buy the book, and thank you for watching. So stay tuned for more content from authors, and if you've liked this video, like it, and subscribing really helps too. So thank you. Thanks.